Okay, welcome back. For those of you who watched my lecture over section 2 and 3 of chapter 5, here is section 1 of chapter 7, how a bill becomes a law. So let's go through this. I think that you know most of this already, but from when you were in middle school, but we'll go through it nonetheless. Okay, so as you know, a bill is a proposed law, and there are thousands and thousands of bills that gets introduced every year. Most congressmen and women know that they're not going to be, they won't become laws, but they do it anyway to appease their constituents or make a point or something like that, right? But anybody can propose one, but they have to be introduced by a congressperson. So either in the House or in the Senate. All bills to raise revenue have to be in the House, though. Okay, so there are different types of bills. There are private bills and there are public bills. Private bills, as I mentioned in section 2, those are the ones that are about specific people, right, or places, right? They could also be claims against the government or something having to do with something that is foreign. These usually go through pretty quickly, right? Public bills, sometimes these can be very controversial, right? Because it might be about health care, it might be about civil rights, abortion, raising taxes, those sorts of things. These make up like only 30% of all the bills, and they apply to all of the nation because they're federal bills, right? And so they deal with very general things that we as American citizens have to deal with. All right. Aside from bills, there are also resolutions. These are kind of like statements. They don't necessarily have the same impact or affect us the same way as laws do, right? So a simple resolution, this deals with either the House or the Senate. So let's say in the House, they pass this resolution because there are more women serving in Congress, so they're going to take away one of the men's bathrooms and make it a female one. Simple resolution. They're going to do something like that, right? So it has to deal with the business of them alone. Now, joint resolution, this kind of has the same impact as a law. Both the House and the Senate have to sign off on it. The president, it can be, the president signs off on it too. So this would be something like a war or a constitutional amendment, which of course it doesn't need the president. But there might be a joint resolution. Some people are talking about, increasing the number on the Supreme Court to 13. And why don't we just make it a constitutional amendment to do that, to set it at that number, right? I've heard Joe Biden talk about that. So that would be a case too. Then there's a concurrent resolution. This takes place both the House and the Senate, and it has to do, they both kind of have to agree to certain things, and it might be, to make a certain day a holiday for them or to adjourn or something like that. So simple resolution, one House. Joint resolution, both houses, has the same impact as law, right? It speeds through, it's a statement of some sort, declaration of war. And then a concurrent resolution, it kind of does the day-to-day businesses of Congress, right? But it doesn't really have the impact of the law. All right, riders. These are horrible, horrible things in my mind, right? So let's say, and this is true. There was a congressman, I think from Tennessee. He was going to vote on the resolution to go to war in Iraq. But before he would do that, he wanted money for a bridge in his own state, right? So they're voting on going to war, but then he's going to get a bridge out of it. And so this is the way that they politic to get all these people on board. These are riders. It's also called pork belly spending because it's these laws that are loaded with all this fat, right? And taxes are spent and everything else. Or they also call it Christmas tree bills because it starts here, but it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You're adding all these things, all these attachments onto bills that oftentimes don't have anything to do with what the bill is about. But this is how some people get their way in government. They're willing to compromise. Some people say, okay, we will add that on because we want this that badly. So that's why you get riders. Okay, and again, as I said, it's sometimes called pork barrel spending, and you could see that up here. Congress is usually seen as really fat. because all these different things have been added on to all these different laws, and both political parties are guilty of doing this. All right, very few bills are passed, as I said, less than 10%. A lot of them, they don't, because it's just so difficult, right? There's all these potentials for delay. There's ways of changing them. They could have a huge impact. There's groups that oppose them and lobby against them. They get amended. And a lot of times people just propose them because they want to make a point, right? They don't have any belief that they're ever even going to be passed. And again, people have to. This is what that talks about. People want to go on record that they did this. They want to get the attention of the media or something like that. So they'll propose a bill, but they know it's not going anywhere. Right. So there are a lot of different steps, and here's the general overview. Right. So it's introduced. Right. In the House, it's placed in the hopper. In the Senate, it's given a number 2, so you get a number on it, and then it moves on to committee. This is where most of the work takes place in Congress, right, in these committee rooms. And then what they do is they invite people to come in who are experts in the field, and there's testimony that takes place. So these hearings take place, and then so they write up the bill. And then it goes out onto the floor for debate. It's either the Senate floor or the House floor. So they vote, they debate on it. Maybe there's going to be filibuster in the Senate on it. Then what's going to happen is that it'll go over to the House, right? If it starts in the Senate, it'll go to the House. If it starts in the House, it'll go over to the Senate. They might have differences, so they come together in a conference committee, produce the same bill. It goes back to be voted on again. Then for the final vote, then it goes to the president. The president can either sign it or veto it. If he vetoes it, then the House and the Senate have the opportunity to override the presidential veto with 2/3 vote. Okay, so that's an overview. Let's look at those step by step. Okay, so anybody can suggest a bill, but it has to be introduced by a person in Congress, right? Oftentimes what we get are 2 different people who propose it. One might be a Republican and one might be a Democrat, so that it can be called a bipartisan bill, right? Okay, so introducing, again, anybody can do that, but in the House, it's placed in the hopper. So this is like a big bin. It gets assigned a number, and then it's placed in, after it's been placed in there. In the Senate, it's introduced by placing it into the inbox on the Senate floor. So the House gets a number. It's called HR for House Resolution. House concurrent resolution, House joint resolution, whatever kind it is. And then in the Senate, it just gets an S, right? So that gets a number, and then it's assigned there. You can look this up in congress.gov. It has all the bills that are introduced listed there, either by date or by category, that sort of thing. Okay, this is the hopper in the House, right? Pretty cool. So it gets its first reading, right? It's read on the House floor, and then it's referred to a committee. The Library of Congress gets an electronic copy of it, and then it's posted, and then you can check the status on congress.gov. Okay, then it goes to committee. This is where most everything takes place. There are 19 different committees in the House and 16 in the Senate. You serve in the one where you have some expertise, right? So it's placed onto their calendar, and then they debate it, and then they can mark it up too, which means that they can change it. So they maybe won't make any changes, but then they could debate it there. So the committee takes action on it. They can accept or reject any changes that are marked up. And then what they do is they type it all up again so it has a clean bill. They can also vote to table it, which means that they're really not going to talk about it anymore. Or what they can do is just set it aside for later, never get to it. That's called pigeonholing, and it just dies. And most bills just die in committee. If they're not tabled, then it's going to be sent out of committee, right? It might get a lot of intensive study at a hearing, it might go to a subcommittee, or it might just go out onto the floor where it's voted on, right? It just depends on the bill. Okay, but most of them go to subcommittees, and here's where you get that expert testimony and points of view, debate about it, maybe marking it up and changing a little bit more, but that here we'll have hearings on it, and that's where they get the testimony. Right? Once it's finished there, if it's passed all these stages, then it's reported out and it's released from the committee and it's reported out onto the floor, right? And then it could go on to a calendar, union calendar, or whatever, private calendar, public calendar, all the different calendars in the House. Remember, there are 5. There's only 2 in the Senate, right? But then it's there, and then it goes onto the floor for debate and for a vote. Right? So here on the floor, you might have some debate, and then what happens? It's reported out on one of the 5 calendars, and then it's placed on the one that's going to the Rules Committee decides when it's going to be voted on and that sort of thing, and then it goes for consideration. So this is kind of a repeat of the last slide. Right? And then they vote on the bill, right? They most often vote electronically. We, the people, get to see it because we have every right to know how our representatives are making decisions in Congress, right? And it's usually in the papers or online how they voted, right? In the Senate, you could do a roll call vote, right? You can do a voice vote, you could do a standing vote. There are different ways of voting, but in the House, it's usually done electronically. I know I went there one time, I watched my congressman vote, and then he looked up to make sure that his vote registered up on the screen. Right. So members with the voice vote, you can say yay for approval, nay for disapproval, and this is in the House or in the Senate. If a majority of the House votes to pass a bill, then the bill will go to the Senate. If the majority of the Senate, then it'll go to the House. Right? And then they do the same thing over. So in this case, we're assuming that it started in the House and then it's going to go to the Senate. The Senate does the same thing, right? If they make amendments on it from the House, it's said to be engrossed, so it's got to be changed. They have to vote on the exact same bill. So that's why they're going to come together with committee, right? And then they'll make the changes, and then it goes back to the House floor, the Senate floor again for a vote, right? Okay, so in the Senate, it's going to go to committee, subcommittee. They're going to do the same things. It could go through the House and then die in the Senate, which oftentimes that's going to happen if you have different political parties. But if they both agree on it, then the differences are going to be ironed out in conference committee, and then they're going to type up a clean bill, and then eventually they're going to send it to the president for him to vote on, or for him to approve or disapprove, not vote on it, right? So if it passes the House and the Senate, as I said, it goes on to the president. Here it's enrolled. The president can take one of several actions, right? He can take no action, and if Congress is in session, then it automatically becomes a law, right? If they are out of session and he does nothing, then it's considered to be a pocket veto, right? If they are out of session. Or the president can sign it, it becomes a law, or he can veto it, right? If he just vetoes it, then it can also go back and they overturn his veto, right? So if the president signs it, if the president signs the, it looks like bill, or takes no action while Congress is in session, then it becomes law. I already told you that. If Congress overrides the presidential veto, then it becomes law, and that takes 2/3 vote to do that. Sorry about that typo up there. All right, so with this veto, he can veto it indirectly by withholding his approval of the bill while Congress is in session, or not do anything when they're adjourned and it's vetoed, or just, no, I'm not going to, then it's vetoed, right? If the House doesn't vote on the veto, so, and then, maybe one would vote to override the presidential veto and the other chamber doesn't, then it's vetoed. It's not a law. It has to be approved by all of them unless Congress overrides a veto. Right, and this is what it talks about here. 2/3 vote or greater is needed by both the House and the Senate. This rarely happens anymore because one political party doesn't get that much power, and usually it's not one branch against the other. Nowadays, it's one party against the other. So we don't get this sort of action that takes place anymore the way that it used to. And this is the last slide. If you click on this, congress.gov, you can go and you can see all sorts of different bills that have been proposed. It's really kind of interesting too. All right, thanks for listening.